tape number 5, interview with Mr. Larry Pick, December the 8th, 1996. When I asked if people got special privileges, could you buy them? Was there any homosexuality? Was there
No.
any prostitution
No.
there?
No.
Were there women there?
No.
Was everybody German Jewish or Austrian?
Also in Czechoslovakian Jewish, yes. They are, besides, when your mind is set just to survive and you are hungry, you are a skeleton, your mind is not on sex.
Were there gypsies in the area?
No.
No. How about children? I know that you were
Nobody-
one of the youngest.
There were no children
There
there.
were no children
No.
there at all. And in the kitchen, did men cook or women cook?
Men. There were
Yeah.
no women there.
What was the most difficult part for you in Salisbury?
The most difficult part was from morning till night. It was a camp which I have no words for it. If you see people slowly dying of hunger, if you see people, the average temperature, the average daily temperature was 20 minus in Celsius. We had one day, it was so cold, that day we didn't have to go out. I don't know, probably the guards didn't want to go out. It was minus 42. Minus 42 Celsius, that's where Fahrenheit and Celsius meet, coincidentally, by minus 42. Now, minus 42, if you have hot coffee or hot soup in your body and warm clothing, it's bad. But it's cannot describe it what it is. People died like flies. And it was, you only saw snow, and once in a while you saw farmers, Latvians. It was like long-haired little horses I had on sleds. I don't know, wagons, everything was snow. And their big fur hats, well, we were freezing. We were always cold. We didn't wash ourselves for 4 or 5 months. There were no lice, it was too cold. When the weather got warmer, there were lice. In the meantime, they had built Badestube, baths, and before we were sent from Salaspils to the ghetto, we got a bath there. It was maybe the first bath I received in 4 months, 5 months. There were no cleaning, brushing of teeth or anything. It was a camp, it was hell. It was, das Schicksal wills viel Opfer for the Salaspils. Fate has decreed. Salaspils demands many victims. Die weiße Hölle von Salaspils, the white hell hole of Salaspils.
Your job was to bury the dead.
Yes.
Did you have to still continue working on the
No.
boards and building barracks?
No.
Just bury
Just
the
that.
dead.
The job in itself at the mass grave wasn't physically heavy, because I mean, how many came every day? 20 corpses, 15, 25, 10. So you could bury them relatively fast. It was just the emotional and everything else involved with it. Don't forget, I was barely 18.
Who guarded you while you were-
Latvian SS.
Latvian SS. When were you taken off that job?
I had that job until I was sent to the ghetto. That was in about July 44. July 42.
So that you were there about 6 months?
I had that job. I didn't have it. I worked with the sawmill and helping build barracks. I had a job maybe for 3 months or so.
And then
And then I was sent to the ghetto. The ghetto, I mean, they were, at that time, of course, we knew already that what was up. I mean, and when the first transport left for the ghetto, people were weak. We arranged that they would put a sign, I forgot, some more mark into the truck. If they arrived in the ghetto, they would put that mark. If that mark wasn't there, they were taken to some extermination.
what
But-
do you mean by a mark?
Well, maybe a chalk mark, I don't remember.
Oh,
or,
on each
on-
person?
No,
No,
each
or-
person. In the truck, inside this truck, because that truck was coming back to Salaspils.
How did they pick make a selection for you to
The
go back
weakest
to
went
Riga?
first. The weakest went first.
At that point,
And nobody volunteered too much for it because usually you associated it already with being sent to extermination.
why were you picked, you know? Or
Why was I
selected to
picked?
go back to Riga?
That was very rapidly, very fast. Salaspils was emptied. It was made by that time already. Latvian non-Jewish political prisoners had arrived. Communists, social democrats. They were, in the beginning, at least when we were there, were treated much better. They got more food. They spoke Latvian, so they could speak to the Latvian SS or so. And later on, we understand it, what I read, they were also, became a bad camp for them.
So was Salaspil totally evacuated of Jews?
The Jews, yes.
The Jews
No,
were-
excuse me, 3 people stayed behind.
3? Why 3?
And one was a watchmaker and handyman. He repaired watches for the German SS. And could all kind. He was a really with tools. I don't remember why the other 2 stayed behind.
How did they send you back?
By truck. When I got to the ghetto, I went back with my father. My father, for him it was very hard in Salaspils. He had some inside job. I forgot what he did actually. But with his angina pectoris, which I did not know as how bad it is, there was a young medical student, was also an inmate, Yoshi Seidemann, and he once examined my father. And he said to me that my father, he confirmed, has angina pectoris, and he should not work hard, should take it easy. So I tried to protect my father in the best way I could, which was very little, and shared my food with him. I was sent back to the camp, to the ghetto from Salaspils together with my father. I still remember when we met our mother, my father very proudly, look how good care I took of him, meaning me. Well, I took care of him, but I let it go, of course. We arrived in the ghetto. When we arrived, my mother was given another room because, again, I think in the beginning I think I slept all the time with my father. The ghetto was full of Wanzen. I don't even know what that is.
Bugs, bed bugs.
Yeah, I mean bed bugs, yeah, full of it. We were deloused. At that time in Salaspils, while it was cold, there were no lice or anything. But when the weather got warmer, all kinds of bugs appeared. We had no change of clothing or anything. We were deloused and given different clothing, and we were registered. We were put into work commandos.
Did you have a uniform of any sort
No.
when you were registered?
No,
Did you get numbers?
not in the ghetto. Not in the ghetto. My first number I got was in Kaiserwald. I'm German.
And how did you find your mother? What did she do when?
My mother was working as a cook's helper, cook. I was more than one woman in an SS-Dienststelle. In other words, an office of the SS, where they whatever they did, and she brought home soup in the evening, the leftovers.
Did you have any contact with your mother while you were in Salisbury?
No, none whatsoever.
Was the Riga ghetto different when you got back in those 6 months? Had anything
Yes, it
changed?
was organized. There was, I don't know whether there was a wire around it before, but now there was a wire. There were many more people there. Other transports had arrived. There was a ghetto elder of the ghetto, Jewish police. But it was a German ghetto. It was separated from the Latvian Jews. The Latvian ghetto was separate.
How was it
By
separated?
a wire, barbed wire, where a guard patrolled that nobody would.
Why were the German Jews separated from the Latvian Jews? Do you know?
That later was relaxed. Later, in 1942.
The leaders of the Jewish leaders of the ghetto, were they German Jews or
German
Latvian
Jews.
Jews?
German Jews.
And in the Latvian, they were Latvian
Yes,
leaders? I
yes.
see. What kind of work did you do? What did you do all day in the ghetto?
I was sent also to an office of the SS, where I think they had transmissions of telegrams and wiring cables, because certain floors we were not permitted to go to. I had taken before we left, I had taken at one time, which I forgot to mention, for about 3 months, preparing myself for the United States, what was called an Umschulungskurs, study a trade. And I studied to become an electrician. And that was at the same time, more or less, when I worked on that building to install. So when they asked me what I could do, also I had very, very little knowledge of electrical wiring or so. I said I'm an electrician because I had learned by then. The more you claim to know, the better your chances were for survival. They said to me, "Do you have tools?" I said yes. I did not have any. All I had was a pocket knife. And I was sent out, and I made friends right away with 2 other fellows, a little bit younger than I am. One was Fritz Hager from Vienna, and one was Fredel Schatten from Vienna. We were like the 3 Musketeers. We protected ourselves. We stood up for each other. We saw to it, for instance, when that we would be indispensable. When I wasn't around, Fritzl, who was a plumber, and Fredel was a painter. When I wasn't around, Fritzl would ruin something, an electric wire, or take a bulb out, and the SS was too lazy to check whether the bulb. They just called electrician, and I fixed it. And Fritzl told me already what was wrong. I, on the other hand, went to the bathroom of the SS and unhinged the tank. The water tank was on top, the old-fashioned water tank. I unhinged it so the water would be running. Or we scratched the wall, so Fredel had a job as a painter. So we were friends to almost to the last moment when the ghetto was dissolved. But go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And I can only explain that by use. I stole from the German SS approximately 20 phonograph records, 78 RPM records. And my friend Fritzl stole the phonograph. He dismantled the phonograph, put it in, he had a wooden box he had built himself. He was very enterprising, very enterprising. If he would have gotten out, he would have been either one of those wheeler dealers or he would be in prison. Either or, I mean. He took unbelievable chances. He disassembled the phonograph, put it in his toolbox where he had all his tools in, and smuggled it in the ghetto, to the ghetto. I smuggled the records underneath my coats. And in the ghetto, well, it was bad, and there were Aktionen too, but there was at least a little resemblance of a normal life, a little, underlined little. Men and women were together. And you got one day off. You didn't have to work. You worked only 6 days wherever you worked. You alternated. And usually Saturday nights, we played the records and the phonograph. And there was a group of people, mostly from Vienna. And a few survived, not too many.
Was there a social life? Were there relationships between the young men
Yes,
and young women?
there were relationships. The Latvian Jews having no women in there, or had very few women in a separate Latvian women's camp, very few, were permitted or entered the German ghetto on Sundays, Sunday afternoons, got girlfriends, had more food than we had because they knew they were around Riga, they were from Riga. They were permitted to have money at that time. And later on, German Jews and Latvian Jews worked together. In the beginning, they didn't. In our group, we were joined by a few Latvian Jews. In fact, our group leader was a Latvian Jew later. His name was Sholem Arolovich. He was, it's very hard to say how old he was, maybe 35, also he had already gray hair. He was from Riga. He had a gold tooth in the front. He was to me like an older brother or father. He was very smart, had a lot of humor still. And during a short time in the ghetto, I was what was called kaserniert. In other words, I was taken out of the ghetto and together with an SS man sent to the beach in Riga and repaired the wiring in a building which was formerly owned by Jews and now occupied by the SS. I had to put in new wiring. And when I came back to the ghetto, I heard that all the Latvian Jewish police had been killed by the German SS because they were found out that they had buried weapons and all kinds of things and had planned perhaps an uprising. I'm just surmising it. And they were all killed at the Blechplatz in the ghetto. Now that was the elite of the Latvian ghetto, the Latvian police. Young Jewish boys, 25, 28, 22. And also some hostages were killed, and one of them was Sholem Arolovich.
How
Yeah.
long were you away?
Or maybe 4 or 5 days.
Was there revolt, open revolt?
No.
I'd like to get back. Were there any marriages in the Riga ghetto?
There were some pregnancies, and people said if somebody had a blinddarm appendix operation, woman, that she had an abortion. I mean, you couldn't want to officially. It was forbidden by punishment of death to have sexual intercourse.
Yeah. Now, who performed the operations?
There was a so-called Lazarett. There were doctors from Riga and some German Jewish doctors, and they risked their life, of course, to perform those operations.
Was there any medication of any sort when?
I really don't know, but I do know that the German commandant, who at that time was Krause, he had a Czech girlfriend by the name of Olli Adler. Olli Adler was a beautician, blonde, maybe dyed hair, I don't know. She was his girlfriend.
There were beauticians.
Well, she was a beautician in Vienna.
Yeah, she was Jewish.
She was Jewish. There was barbers. When you went to the barber to get your hair cut, you were, since he could not go out and get some food on the outside, you either brought him a little food or you brought him a piece of wood to get a stove burning so it kept warm, the little barber shop.
But there were services, in other words. You could
There
have
were
your hair cut.
services. There were services.
And what other normalcies of life were there? If you could get your hair cut, you could go to. Could you buy anything in a store? No stores.
No, you got rations. You got rations. Once in a while, you got horse meat, bad-smelling horse meat. You got a minimum of rations, which, if hopefully you supplemented it by food you got from the outside. If you were on a working detail, which was good in our eyes, you got a good soup at lunchtime. If you were in the worst one, you got nothing. But usually you got soup at least, and it depends whether it was a good soup or a bad soup, and that was a big deal.
Were there any children in the ghetto?
Yes, there were children in the ghetto, which the first ones I think were taken. Well, I was in Salaspils. I think in February 1942 was the first big so-called Aktion Dynaminde, where the old ones and the young ones were taken away, supposedly to a fish canning factory, they were told, and they were all killed in the Rumbumbuli forest again, like where the Latvian Jews had been killed. And of course, not everybody, there were still children left, but very few, because when such Aktionen were taking place, some people hit the children or whatever.
Were there facilities for the children, any education, any schooling?
I don't think so. I don't agree with Dr. Schneider, but maybe she has better memory or better experience. She said, she made a statement, there was some schooling going on, which could very well be. I was not aware of it.
What about social life for you young people, so-called young people, with your record player and your
Well, that took
records,
place usually on Saturday night. We, of course, coming from Salaspils, it looked like paradise. I mean, what looked bad today or bad to you, for me it was like heaven. I mean, we did not go hungry, or hardly. I mean, tolerate. I mean, it was we were hungry, but not the fear of starving to death wasn't. We had enough carrots, because some women who made the soup, the food for the SS, I remember they were peeling the carrots, and when we passed by, we took a few of the carrots and we ate them.
What about newspapers and culture?
There were no
cultural
newspapers. I never attended. I can only speak my own experience. I never attended any cultural affair in the ghetto in Riga.
It didn't exist, or you didn't want to attend?
I was not offered to come to. If it existed, I was not aware of.
What about news from the outside world? How did you get it? Or did
You
get
got it at one time. When I was working in the SS as the electrician, I got a British station, and of course, if I would have been caught in German, broadcasting in German, giving the news, but the news was not so much different than what you got out of German newspapers. When you didn't get a German newspaper, but of course you didn't. But passing by one, you glanced at the headlines, or you found one, in the garbage, and you put it in your pocket, or little things. It triggered. You'll be surprised what the rumor mill and some truth is in it
What about
spreads.
radios, for the German radios? Could you hear them?
You were not permitted to
You're
have
not
a,
permitted
oh
any
no. The
radios.
radios, the Jews were already in 1939 or 40 had to turn in all radios in Germany and Czechoslovakia.
Was there any semblance of Jewish religious life there?
Again, there probably was. I was not aware of. I did not participate in it.
If someone died in the ghetto, what happened?
Well, first of all, if somebody died, the Aktionen took care of the older ones, and whenever there was an Aktion, they also emptied the so-called Krankenrevier, the so-called hospital. Whoever was in there was, just like later in Kaiserwald, was put on the transport. So there were very few people, older people, people who were not able to work, or people who were dying, natural deaths.
But if somebody died, was there
There
any
was a
kind of
cemetery.
Jewish burial of any sort?
I don't know. I have no idea. I know there was a Jewish cemetery because the father of a friend of mine was shot there because he was caught. He was caught having German money on him, and the daughter went to the Commandant Krause and pleaded for his life. She was a very pretty girl. She got out, lives in New York, and pleaded for his life. And he says, "I do you a favor. I give you a choice. Do you want him hung or shot?" So she said, talking about the life of her father, she opted for shooting. He was killed by Krause in the cemetery wall, and it left a bitter scar on her too.
Were there rabbis there?
Well, my Hebrew teacher was there. There was no rabbi from Stuttgart there, or no rabbi from Czechoslovakia.
Did anybody pray or have any organized kind of religion?
If there was any kind of organized, it would be difficult. It would have had to take place at night, I guess, because you worked 6 days a week and you alternated. Sometimes you worked on Sundays, sometimes you were off on Sundays. I was not aware of it.
Did you know calendar dates, like when Jewish holidays were?
Yes, we had an inkling. We did not get any matzahs, regardless what Traudel says. It was the will to survive. I mean, the will, the life was so demanding that religion, at least for me, for my parents, the people I got together with, played a minor role.
Did you know when it was Yom Kippur?
I don't remember. I could very well be. Every day was Yom Kippur.
We will change our tape again.